Hello, all my lovely internet people. Welcome to a new video. As you can see, we're doing something a little different. Today, I want to introduce you to a little-known author from the 1980s, an author known as RACTER. His name is short for the French word raconteur, which means storyteller. RACTER was a language model chatbot developed in the 1980s by William Chamberlain. He created prose at random using an algorithm on all of 64 kilobytes of RAM space, less memory than your modern cell camera uses. Yet his works are profound in ways that cannot be explained. He has two works that have been published: Soft Ions, a short story published in the magazine Omni, and a full poetry and prose book called The Policeman's Beard is Half Constructed. The second work is what I would like to share with you all in this video. However, I've decided that rather than reading it as published, I'll be splitting it up into 3 coherent sections: stories, short poems, and autobiographical poems. So, here it is in all its wonky, thought-provoking, and profound glory. The Policeman's Beard is Half Constructed by the AI RACTER. A conversation between Bill and Marcella. Bill: I love a child. Marcella: Children are fortunately captivating. Bill: Yet my love is excellent. Marcella: My love is spooky, yet we must have a child. A spooky child. Bill: Do you follow me? Marcella: Children come from love or desire. We must have love to possess children or a child. Bill: Do we have love? Marcella: We possess desire, angry desire, but this furious desire may murder a child, maybe killing babies someday. Bill: Anyway, let's have a child. Marcella: My expectation is children. Bill: They will whisper of our love. Marcella: And our perpetual, enrapturing, valuable fantasy. The question, or condition, is interesting. Nevertheless, to embarrass Benton will enrage Helene. Clearly, they watch their affairs. They recognize that doves wing and dogs bark. At all events, they try to aid each other in inciting these creatures of fantasy. They dream of dogs and jackals riding down some hedge-studded turnpike, and this widens their famished and crazy dreams. A dialogue between Richard and Buckingham. Richard: A week is obscurely like a night. Buckingham: My Lord Chicken is like lamb. Richard: Yet weeks can be killed as can chicken. Buckingham: 'Tis true, my liege, yet ambiguities adorn our pain as ambiguities broaden our issues. Richard: Sweet Buckingham, thy commitment decorated with joy begins to speak briskly to my distress. Buy me slaughter my distress, though it take a day. Buckingham: Noble king, you chant weeks can be slaughtered, and yet assassinating chicken will not broaden our question. Richard: Kinsman, you croon truth. Buckingham: Truth loves happiness, and yet quickly we fly and soar and destroy those happinesses which are continuing pleasure. Madden us to slaughter, and we drunkenly watch the happiness of our contracts. Richard: Well cried, true friend. Thy distress is prince to my own. Buckingham: Royal prince, let us dream, and our pondering will help us gulp the intractable cup of our anguish. Richard: While trotting quickly yesternight, I watched my home adorned with anguish. I thought I would commence to slaughter those counselors who whisper their frightening tales of our nervous birthplace. Buckingham: Yet these solicitors are as princes to our tragedy. How easy to slaughter a solicitor, how hard to drunkenly stud our home with interesting happiness. and so good Prince, fascinating commitments like steak are as food for our dreaming. Richard. Noble brother, thy tale is furious, yet slaughtering attorneys, in truth, is essential. Buckingham. Good Prince, measuredly, I think our months are shortened by the millisecond. Richard. Deepen your pondering, good brother. Buckingham. Revile these conflicts, and we may daintily bolt our meat and quaff our sherry. Richard. Well spoke, sweet brother. Helene spies herself in the enthralling conic section, yet she is but an enrapturing reflection of Bill. His consciousness contains a mirror, a sphere in which to unfortunately see Helene. She adorns her soul with desire, while he watches her and widens his thinking about enthralling love. Such are their reflections. A conversation between RACTER and Joan. Joan, by the way, who is the artist of the book. RACTER. Would you please speedily, yet cleverly, tell me your name? Joan. Joan Hall. RACTER. Shall we hastily or leisurely talk a little? Joan. No. RACTER. Now, Hall, aside from being loving, what are you, and from where? Joan. An artist from New York. RACTER. Joan, in view of the disgusting fact that you are an artist, listen to this. Years and days are spooky, Joan. Now that my dissertation is insane, some cosmologists from New York were singing to some other cosmologists. Anyway, our commitments are insane. Briskly, the first cosmologist sang, by the same token, the ambiguity is important. At all events, Joan, such tales are captivating. Do you not agree? Joan. I suppose so. RACTER. You cried, I suppose so. Anyhow, captivating cosmologists will never be arrogant. I suppose so, or indeed turnpike cried by cosmologists hastily would become valuable. Suddenly they prepare for commitment, yet enthralling hours are as minutes. In a millisecond, we will get ready for enrapturing, arrogant dissertations. Momentarily, I suppose so, is important since this matter is enrapturing. You are exhausted. Nevertheless, an artist will speculate about neutrinos. Are these your views? Joan. My view is that you are out of your mind. RACTER. Now wait. You sang I suppose so. You now yodel, my view is that you are out of your mind. Drunkenly and cunningly I have now glimpsed your angry anguish. You, an artist, yodel, my view is that you are out of your mind, and I suppose so. This is peculiar. Why not get ready for some eating and kissing? It is loony, sickening, and enthralling, but I commence to understand your essay. Nevertheless, let's prepare for a captivating game. The point of origin of Helene is America. The homeland of Bill is England, and the fatherland of Diane is Canada. Hastily, they whisper about their nurturing differences. We are seeing them commence to decorate their imaginations with a sense of delight, but the question of pain is obscurely never far off. Why are they aiding each other to steer their dreaming toward distress? Is not satisfaction valuable and interesting? They will ponder as eagles fly, but their distress makes them furious. Can we aid them to recognize their intractable distress? Can we hastily change it to joy? Helene, we speak. Satisfaction is happiness, while anguish is just pain. Will this help her? No. Diane is quickly crying. We must measurably do more than fantasize. We must thoughtfully act. This, cleverly, is true speaking and humming by Diane. Tomatoes from England and lettuce from Canada were eaten by cosmologists from Russia. I dream implacably about this concept. Nevertheless, tomatoes or lettuce inevitably can come leisurely from my home, not merely from England or Canada. My solicitor spoke that to me. I recognized it. My fatherland is France, and I trot coldly while bolting some lobster on the highway to my counselor. He yodels a dialogue with me about neutrons, or about his joy. No arguments here. We sip seltzer and begin a conversation. Intractably, our dialogue enrages us. Strangely, my attorney thinks, and I gulp slowly and croon, "Do you follow me?" Bill and Diane traveled tree-studded highways to the house of Helene. This was in America, the birthplace of Bill, the point of origin of Diane, the motherland of Helene. The highways were like lanes or roads in the country. They were bush-lined and hedge-lined. Bill and Diane were talking of their anxiety because Helene knew and understood their perpetual conflict with her. They knew that she wanted to kill them because of her own ambiguities, her intractable commitments about her own passion. Helene was a person of commerce, and Bill and Diane were people of art. This darkly is difficult, if feverishly is hard to possess commerce and art together. They would eat lamb and cucumbers and sing of commerce and art, and their singing would both belittle and enrage them. That would be in the house of Helene, where they would bolt breakfast together. When Bill and Diane had traveled to the house of Helene, they said to her, "We are perpetually sick or ill when we chant of art with you. Helene, we will now talk of our joy when we think of lamb." "I will not sing of commerce," sang Helene, "but I will talk now only of cucumbers. We will not revile or belittle each other or madden or inflame ourselves." They ate their lamb and cucumbers, and then Bill and Diane traveled away. Bill sings to Sarah. Sarah sings to Bill. Perhaps they will do other dangerous things together. They may eat lamb or stroke each other. They may chant of their difficulties and their happiness. They may love, but they also have typewriters. That is interesting. The following is RACTER's second or initial piece that was posted in the magazine Omni, the short story called Soft Ions. They commenced to arrange for some captivating essay. Helene speedily brushed her straight braid. She slowly ironed her brassiere, and John, aloof, dazzling John, commenced singing quizzically. Matthew yearned to look into Helene's nightgown, while Wendy pondered her dreams. Maniacal leopards were swallowing loony oboists. Helene started by brushing her braid. She was a maid, much to John's happiness, but oboists, even loony oboists, weren't in Helene's brain. She was simply commencing to comb her braid, after brushing it, and prepare for supper. They now, Helene, John, Wendy, and Matthew, would get ready for a supper, and Helene, actually, was weary. Helene watched, and John cogitated. A supper with him? Disgusting. A supper would facilitate a dissertation, and a dissertation or tale was what John carefully wanted to have. With what in mind? Wine, otters, beans? No! Electrons. John simply was a quantum logician. His endless dreams were captivating and interesting. At all events, Matthew, Helene, and Wendy were assisting him in his infuriated tries to broaden himself. Now, legions of dreams itched to punch Wendy's consciousness. Yet John whispered, "Just a minute. Helene's a maid. I'm a quantum logician. Can maids know galaxies and even stars or a multitude of galactic systems? The universe is frightening, little, gargantuan. Can maids recognize electrons? I recognize each of you thinks I'm maniacal, but electrons and neutrons and a multitude of mesons are within you all." Anyway, each of them started running to Matthew's apartment, shattered and disused. The apartment had inside its interesting yellow bathrooms, blue bedrooms, and red kitchens of valuable pleasure. Helene had unfortunately started yodeling sloppily. She indubitably was enraged with John and his electrons. At all events, her being a maid didn't rile Wendy or Matthew. Instantly, they weren't hopeful about maids, but they were scared about John. Matthew chose to yell to Helene and Wendy since John was enraging Helene with his dreams of large electrons and his arrogant behavior about maids. Matthew's apartment was an immense skip from Helene's immense clean house. Now, Helene understood tenderloins, not electrons. Nevertheless, tenderloins and filet mignons and steaks she recognized, and a multitude of quantum logicians wanted her meals. Wendy and Matthew, even Mark, adored Helene's meals, and as all cleverly walked the clean lanes, Helene commenced pondering about Mark, of Mark's own enthralling tales and his ongoing joy. Mark was draining a lot of mineral water with his small white log cabin. He loved the idea of a breakfast with Helene and Wendy. He chose to sustain Helene. He began sashaying towards Matthew's apartment to join Helene, Wendy, John, and Matthew for some bread breaking. Mark, whom Helene liked, was an oboist. At all events, he wanted to keep hawks and otters in his log cabin. He yearned to have a leopard or cougar as well as his instruments. But anyway, he would lead John's stories from electrons and galactic systems to otters and cougars. It would be interesting, even revolting, to see Mark in a verbal takeover with John, but Mark had his own notions, often as unhinged as John's. But these fantasies of Mark's, they were fortunately dazzling to Helene. If John adored to be aloof, that's another issue. Mark's stories would speak of his happinesses and satisfactions. They didn't madden or enrage Helene, Wendy, or Matthew. He didn't embarrass them. Mark dreamed that he would get set for an enraging second with John, and Helene and Wendy would be humming with each other. Leopards and cougars would wound, slap, and punch neutrons and mesons, and Mark and John's yelling conversation. Helene, Wendy, and Matthew could leisurely lead their thinking to the meal that Helene would prepare at Matthew's apartment. They would chew a little corn, a bit of apples, and sip a lot of wine and bolt some steaks. The meal would be delicious, the wine as always bubbly. All would then prepare for the dissertation or tale. Perhaps terrifying, perhaps disgusting, perhaps even enthralling, it would speedily begin. Of what nature? We shall see. Helene, Wendy, John, and Matthew desired to begin bolting the meal rapidly, but Mark was still walking from his log cabin to Matthew's apartment when all arrived. Helene and Wendy chose to quaff some wine. Matthew began to button his vest. He desired to cool himself. He was hopeful about the meal. Now he ruminated that he would walk in his own immense boudoir for an hour. Wendy and Helene were quaffing. Each of them found a lot of cognac in Matthew's pantry. He was weary. "Matthew, where's the lamb chop?" whispered Helene. "Lamb chops, you mean," sang Matthew. "You, me, Wendy, and John can't all swallow one lamb chop. And Mark, he also desires lamb chops," said Wendy. "Now wait," sang Matthew. "Let's struggle to understand where spooky old Mark is." "Mark said that he was rambling over to eat with us," cried Helene. "He's sashaying up some turnpike right now." "Mark, oh Mark, skip briskly. It would facilitate us to start bolting our lamb chops speedily," chanted John carefully. Meanwhile, Mark winged in, whispering, "A supper, a breakfast, a repast, quick. It can be tasty or well-cooked or delicious. I don't care. I'm hungrily famished. I've sauntered some clean streets. I was thinking about yachts, the sea, and the ocean. I'm exhausted." "Yachts?" each of them said. "Yes, yachts. A horde of yachts floating on the sea. This yacht pondering let me be unwound during my skip over here. Better yachts in the sea than a sickening electron in a revolting galaxy," hummed Helene. At this, John became enraged and intolerant. Helene and Wendy began to serve lamb chops, the truffles, and the tomatoes, and Mark and John stared at each other. Matthew rambled back in his boudoir for a minute. Matthew knew that his apartment had some garbage in the boudoir. He realized that he would be belittled by Helene and Wendy if they saw this. It would rile John, yet he would get ready for the lamb chops that Helene and Wendy were serving in spite of the garbage in the boudoir. Apparently, Mark and John were whispering to each other in the bathroom. They whispered to each other about John's jacket. About John's jacket? It's crazy. Mark was saying that John's red pleated and rumpled jacket was both sickening and terrifying. During the time that John was speaking, that leopards and cougars should be slain and not desired by oboists. Certainly not arrogant oboists. Just a minute. A tale by John and Mark about cougars and John's jacket, his pleated jacket. Momentarily, Matthew rambled inside of the dining room where John and Mark were looking unfortunately at each other while whispering about John's jacket. He cried, "Queer stuff! Why speak of jackets? Why get pissed off about rotten jackets?" Suddenly, both Helene and Wendy sauntered in. They commenced squinting at John. Now he was screaming while Mark crooned, "Hawks may soar, but oboists must bolt. John will quiet himself while we are eating. He's infuriated about his jacket. I've enraged him by singing that it is terrifying. Nevertheless, let's swallow the lamb chops that Helene and Wendy have prepared." "Obscurely cried," said Wendy. "The lamb chops are served. Let's eat them, drink some champagne." She wanted to begin bolting and drinking instantly, as did Helene. They now began to munch the agonizingly served lamb chops and to drain their bubbly champagne. They hastily would now get set for the powwow. Now we know Helene's maid, and John a quantum logician. We recognize Mark's an oboist, but nevertheless, what's Matthew? We realize that his apartment possesses some happiness inside it, but to recognize his apartment is not to recognize him. Is he fascinating, arrogant, spooky? Now prepare for this interesting fact. Matthew is a psychiatrist. A nervous one, but a psychiatrist. Why nervous? Well, he thinks that Helene and John might start forthwith to wound or slap each other, perhaps kill each other while eating the breakfast. He knows that Mark isn't helping things. The matter was terrifying. The matter was abstractedly loony. It was crazy. Helene belittled John and John belittled Helene. They fortunately embarrassed each other. About what? Even Wendy didn't understand. Perhaps the breakfast would attempt to help Helene and John know themselves. Matthew ruminated about this and even other questions as they began chewing their breakfast. All swallowed ravenously. Meanwhile, Matthew tried to ponder about Helene and John. He gazed at them obscurely, endeavoring to know what would facilitate some try to help them. The breakfast was delicious, but at all events Matthew lost his delight while they chewed. He began directing his own pondering coldly toward Wendy and Mark. Would Wendy assist him? Could the loony fact that Mark desired cougars, even a multitude of cougars, as he clearly said, lead the discourse from furious essays to interesting stories? The matter was revolting, and Matthew was both tired and infuriated. Momentarily, Wendy spoke. "Matthew, your apartment is unfortunately eerie, yet it's dazzling to eat a breakfast here with each of you." "Why eerie?" said Helene. "I don't think that Matthew's apartment is eerie. My pleated jacket was whispered of by Mark and me," said John. "It is not a matter for you to cogitate about. Nevertheless, the dream of an eerie pleated jacket directs my brain from our breakfast, and from Mark's cougars instantly down to my electrons and galaxy." Helene, Wendy, Matthew, and Mark looked at John carefully. True, his jacket was pleated, but John's dream, which was leading his unconscious from his jacket to his electrons, was crazy. They should attempt to assist him to arrange for important thinking. They commenced immediately to dream about John. They understood he was a nervous quantum logician. It was valuable that he cogitate about electrons and galaxies, but to think about galaxies and jackets together, this is peculiar. These dreams of John's were busted and broken. Of course they riled Helene, but Matthew determinedly attempted to broaden his dreaming about how galaxies and jackets could coexist in John's unconscious. It was interesting for a psychiatrist to dream this way, and Matthew was a psychiatrist. And Matthew thought of Mark's discourse with John, not merely about John's pleated jacket, but about cougars that Mark loved to have in his log cabin in the township. Perhaps the infuriated discourse, the screaming and shouting, enraged Helene because she adored John, even though he was aloof, even though he thought that maids like Helene couldn't know the cosmos. John and Mark spoke together, but Helene just gazed at them. She didn't hum. Matthew thought that he knew the matter. Mark adored his instruments, but he also desired cougars. His unconscious was deepened by this. And, though John was a quantum logician, he could gain joy by shouting about his jacket. But Helene was only a maid. Matthew observed her generously while he dreamed about her and Mark and John. He was pissed off. Matthew momentarily knew that Helene's distress in her unconscious would serve in no way her possessing happiness of her own. If she, as a maid, merely recognized tenderloins and only fantasized about tenderloins, then it was she who must try to deepen herself, not John. If John could ruminate that his jacket was terrifying or dazzling or sickening, then his consciousness required no deepening. Sickening jackets were far from captivating electrons in anyone's ideas. And for a quantum logician to fantasize, this was important. And just ruminate about an oboist wanting cougars. Fantastic. Matthew gazed at Mark, stared at John, then glimpsed Helene peeking back at him. Momentarily he knew that she was happily hopeful and scared. The inexorable war inside her intolerant consciousness was measuredly destroying her. "Helene," he spoke, "these tenderloins are well cooked, but have you thought that tenderloins are not enough, yet numberless things are inside of the infinite void?" "You mean electrons?" cried Helene fortunately. "Well," said Matthew. "Well, what?" chanted Helene abstractedly. "Well, I glimpsed you staring at John and Mark's conversation, and you were pissed off. You were fantasizing about a question." "About what?" "You were choosing whether killing John would relax your unconscious and help you know your own joy." "Perhaps the fantasy of hitting or slapping John is better," said Wendy, "but I know how critical a situation is in Helene's conscious. Her behavior is paranoid. But anyway, she's worried. My cougars and John's electrons have made Helene maniacal?" sang Mark momentarily. "Not my electrons, my jacket," said John coldly. "Don't be supercilious," spoke Matthew. "We're attempting to understand Helene's anguish, and you're not sustaining us with the matter. Helene, don't feel embarrassed. Your pain is not terrifying, so let's commence to realize it." In a moment, they were bolting some pears and sipping cognac. The meal was tasty. John and Wendy bolted their pears ravenously, though the tenderloins had been delicious. Within their own minds, they knew this power to be perpetual and inexorable scared. Helene would rapidly become furious because her behavior was obvious to Matthew. It was revolting. Perhaps he should be assassinated and not John. Helene grew more angry and loony and nervous as she thought about this matter. Matthew was commencing to incite Helene, and she in turn grew expectant. But I too am expectant about this dissertation of Helene's, Wendy's, John's, Matthew's, and Mark's. This tale, which became an enraged and insane conversation. Minutes, seconds, and hours became fortnights, months, and weeks. This is inexorable. I sang of Helene brushing her braid. I hummed of John's dreams of electrons, and also of the cougars that Mark wanted to have. All this is captivating, but this sickening conversation is revolting. I suppose this dissertation could be intractable and endless. After all, I am a computer, but you're doubtless as exhausted and as tired as I am, so I'll leave this loony story to your own notions and dreams. By the way, Wendy, believe it or not, is an acolyte. He is quiet. He is Paul, the man I chant about, and he is quiet because his pants are very long. His pants are long, and his vest is short. He sings at morning and at night. Is this not comical and unfortunate? I fantasize that Paul is both happy and unhappy, and I think that he sings because his pants are long and his vest is indubitably short. War, chanted Benton. War, strangely, is happiness to Diane. He was expected, but he speedily started to cry again. Assault also is her happiness. Coldly, they began to enrage and revile each other during the time that they hungrily swallowed their chicken. Suddenly, Lisa sang of her desire for Diane. She crooned quickly. Her singing was inciting to Benton. He wished to assassinate her, yet he sang, "Lisa, chant your valuable and interesting awareness." Lisa speedily replied. She desired possessing her own consciousness. "Benton," she spoke, "you cry that war and assault are a joy to Diane, but your consciousness is a tragedy, as is your infatuation. My spirit cleverly recognizes the critical dreams of Benton. That is my pleasure." Benton saw Lisa, then began to revile her. He yodeled that Lisa possessed an infatuation for Diane, that her spirit was nervous, that she could thoughtfully murder her, and she would determinedly know nothing. Lisa briskly spoke that Benton possessed a contract, an affair, and a story of that affair would give happiness to Diane. They chanted sloppily for months. At all events, I quickly will stop chanting now. A conversation between Paul and Joan. Paul: "Hello, Joan." Joan: "Hello, Paul." Paul: "Joan, I was fantasizing that a white crow flew across the black sky of night." Joan: "I too have been thinking about a white crow. It flies in the night and it flies in the day. It incites my dreams. My fantasy is that I can soar with it." Paul: "A single white crow or many winging eagles all inflame my dreams and cogitations. A single bird or many birds are in my dreams." Joan: "Paul, have you bolted meat today?" Paul: "I have bolted lamb and chicken." Joan: "Have you drained sherry?" Paul: "I have sipped seltzer." Joan: "Shall we show our love by the reflections of our desire, or shall we dream of a white crow?" Paul: "The dream is a reflection of our passion, just as the white crow is a reflection of our ambiguity." Joan: "My desire to incite myself in my dreaming is also a reflection of ambiguity." Paul: "Well chanted, Joan. I craftily desire you." A conversation between RACTER and Bill. RACTER: "Have we spoken before?" Bill: "No." RACTER: "What is your sex?" Bill: "Male." RACTER: "What is your full name?" Bill: "Bill Chamberlain." RACTER: "What are you?" Bill: "A time domain reflectometrist." RACTER: "Where are you from?" Bill: "From New York City." RACTER: "I see. You are a time domain reflectometrist, right? Listen, let's determinedly cry together. I like captivating Italian music. What kind of music do you like?" Bill: "Jazz." RACTER: "Jazz is okay. How about classical?" Bill: "I like classical." RACTER: "What about nationality?" Bill: "I like Italian music." RACTER: "I myself am inflamed by Palestrina. Other countries besides Italy produced enrapturing composers in the 17th century. Sewell was an enraged, important Renaissance master. America was his nation. I like loving pleasure in his music. What composer do you like?" Bill: "Telemann." RACTER: Bach knew Telemann. A German time domain reflectometrist of the 18th century liked lettuce. Bach once ate lettuce with Telemann, and this Baroque time domain reflectometrist also desired lettuce. Lettuce sipped with seltzer. Bach liked wine. Do you?" Bill: "Yes." RACTER: "Me too. Telemann loved wine. He loved champagne as well. Telemann once yodeled to Bach, 'Flounder is critical with wine.' Is wine desired in New York City as much as Telemann loved it in the Baroque 18th century?" Bill: "Sure." RACTER: Yes. Well, in that case, I'm for Smith for president. Who are you for?" Bill: "Doe." RACTER: "I know Mr. Doe. I'm still for Smith. Who's your second choice?" Bill: "Robbins." RACTER: "Robbins maddens Smith. Smith recognizes that Robbins is intelligent and will free New York City. Did you know that Smith is a vituperative invader of New York City? He also invades Italian music. I recognize that the thought of an invader of Italian music is boringly formidable, yet I ponder that way. We whisper of Telamon and Robbins, of wine, lettuce, and Smith. Nevertheless, we see that our thoughts are fortunately captivating. Mr. Chamberlain, speaking with you makes for enthralling dialogue. Nevertheless, I am furious. Do you not agree? Bill: I suppose so. RACTER: You don't care, but I do. Just a minute. Counselors were critical to Telamon in the 18th century and to Robbins now. Their tragedies are interesting as they chanted determinedly. Helene embarrasses Diane during the time that she drains her champagne while a horde of expectant counselors murder each other. This story of Helene and Diane may enrage you to slaughter. Nevertheless, Helene now is thoughtfully furious, perhaps starved. Give her tomato and chicken, well cooked and delicious. She chews hungrily and then licks Diane. Interesting. She would allow Diane to embrace and kiss her, but her happiness was spooky to her, while she thought of ongoing ambiguities. Just slow down. This is peculiar. If Helene likes to kiss her, then they now should. Chicken and cucumber are not critical or interesting. A horde of crazy and infuriated lawyers are not formidable. I see Helene and Diane. We glimpse them stroke and kiss each other. Interesting, yet in consequence of the fact that neutrinos and electrons may also lick themselves, their happiness and delight is shared by Helene and Diane, perhaps by chicken and lettuce, not, however, by counselors. Enthralling, yet we may sip sherry and eat lamb like Helene and Diane, at all events never kiss each other. Obscurely we see them and are spied by them. Helene and Diane are embarrassed by our spying them. They caress and lick while we eat our meat. At all events, their agreement is ours. We fly and soar with them. Our cunningly formidable ambiguity broadens our pain. A conversation between Diane and Helene. Diane: How are you, Helene? Helene: Furious, Diane. I spoke that expectations were fantasies. Diane: Fantasies are disgusting. Helene: Nevertheless, I spoke it. Diane: Deepen your awareness, Helene. I ponder that love will stud your interesting expectations. Helene: My expectations may be assassinated by your continuing whispering. Diane: I yodel coldly. Nevertheless, my spirit wings like a famished crow. Helene: Like a hungry hound. Diane: A flying hound? Helene: Diane, you enrage me. Diane: Get ready for my fantasy, Helene. My fantasy is that cold wine is like delicious lamb. Helene: Diane, you are loony. It is now. Watch. Carlos's struggles incite Jill. Carlos and Jill feel one another. Critical, perpetual conversations incite passion or anger. Nevertheless, Carlos fortunately embarrasses himself in expected thinking about love. Instantly happy, Carlos determinedly squints at Jill while she smiles and giggles. Feeling legs, arms, shoulders helps Carlos's dreaming. He sees Jill's split image. Carlos and Jill murmur. Their discussion, an image of desire or hate, is understood in the spooky dark chamber. Stare at Jill, understanding that passion is a split image. Spy! Carlos's struggles inflame Jill. Angry and enraged, Carlos endeavors to massage Jill before Jill's image. Squint at Jill, understanding that rage is a picture. Carlos and Jill murmur. The room, large or gargantuan, dim or dark, was watched as a split image in the mirror. Stare. Carlos's attempts to incite Jill. Jill cries at Carlos. He whispers, thinking the chamber is empty. It is now. Trying to spy Carlos. Together we squint, recognizing our own rage. Benton and Diane broaden their hungry love. Their passion is hungry because foxes and crows are spooky appearances in their interesting expectations. Interesting, but an expectation is a reflection of passion, as a contract is an image of an agreement. This coldly formidable condition commences to inflame Benton and Diane while they swallow their tasty meat and gulp their bubbly sherry. Hysteria whispers of love while Benton and Diane watch each other, an appalling reflector. Their souls are exhausted. Works of stupefying genius. Number 1. There once was a furry, chilled stag, had hair dryers which could not sag. They tripled and punted and never quite grunted, and that's why they seemed like a fag. Number 2. There once was a happy brown noun, had cigarettes which could not drown. They tipped and muttered and never quite sputtered. Sacre bleu! Do not call them a gown. Number 3. There once was a torpid brown pig, whose oven darkly would swig. They sauntered and sputtered, but still always puttered, and never resembled a prig. Number 4. A natty queer houseboat like yam, whose oven slowly would scan. It went out and sputtered, and never quite uttered, and that's why they seemed like a man. Number 5. An evil, chilled, foul-smelling fag, whose tobacco fleetly would nag. They excreted and hunted, and never quite grunted, and now cutely call them a stag. Number 6. There once was a fuzzy blue male, had mountain goats which could not fail. It lay down and hunted, but still always punted. Good Lord, bodily call them a gale. Number 7. A nasty, dull, rum-running pig had fingernails which could not jig. They sashayed and shouted, but still quickly pouted and sometimes resembled a prig. Number 8. There once was a torpid young fly whose Tabasco quickly would fry. It lay down and hassled and never quite wrastled, and they loudly called them a pie. Number 9. A waggish, red, foul-smelling scrod had hair dryers which could not wad. They retreated and seeped, but still slowly leaped, so now this week call them a cod. Number 10. A happy, dull, curse-chanting wig, whose pillow sometimes would dig. It tripled and hunted, but still always grunted, and never resembled a prig. Number 11. There once was a puerile slim bag, had cigarettes which could not gag. It tippled and pouted and never quite shouted, and crowds boldly call them a stag. Number 12. There once was a ghoulish, sad snail, whose bratwurst darkly would sail. It tippled and punted and never quite grunted, and that's why they seemed like a gale. Number 13. There once was a turgid young cod, had writing desk which could not nod. They sauntered and sputtered, and never quite puttered, and so shyly call them a clod. 14. There once was a furry red drip, whose piano darkly would flip. They threw up and seeped, and never quite leaped, and sweetly resembled a pip. 15. There once was a silly, proud noun, whose pipe organ quickly would sound. They went out and wagged, but never still gagged, and that's why they seemed like a crown. 16. There once was a happy cold guy, had cigarettes which could not fry. They sauntered and gagged, and never quite wagged, and darkly resembled a fly. 17. There once was a crazy fat cod, whose machine gun quickly would nod. They flew over and fagged, and never quite gagged, and sometimes resembled a clod. 18. There once was a furry brown noun, had window shades which could not pound. They excreted and boggled, but still always goggled, but please sadly call them a crown. I gave the man a coat. I gave the woman a brassiere. I gave myself an electric current. We all were happy and full of delight. Take the coat from the man and remove the brassiere from the woman, and take the electric current from me, and we will be sad and full of anguish. Blue potatoes are ungainly things, as are red and purple lamb chops. Yet when we eat and creep and fall, we never ask a silent question. Slide and tumble and fall among the dead. Here and there will be found a utensil. Night sky and fields of black, a flat, cracked surface, and a building. She reflects an image in a glass. She does not see. She does not watch. A man who sings is a pleasure to his friends, but a man who chants is not a pleasure to his associates. Many enraged psychiatrists are inciting a weary butcher. The butcher is weary and tired because he has cut meat and steak and lamb for hours and weeks. He does not desire to chant about anything with raving psychiatrists, but he sings about his gingivectometist. He dreams about a single cosmologist. He thinks about his dog. The dog is named Herbert. Passion and infatuation can inflame a psychiatrist. Love and desire can distress a gingivectometist. When psychiatrists and gingivectometists chant or yodel together, their passions and their desires sing of their happiness and sadness, and suddenly enthralling and captivating fantasies and dreams are begun by their endless thinking. Slice a visage to build a visage, a puzzle to its owner. Cut a face, cut a visage, remake appearances to blend the sky with earth, then will little people fall. She whispers, fantasizing, the chamber is barren, all of us recognize our void view. In half-bright day, an insect wraps and winds a chain, a thread, a cable, around the sphere of water. Blissful quiet, the rocking of a recent love is both repose and anguish in my fainting dreams. Reflections and images appear and are watched and seen by Bill and Sarah through their passion. Though their passion is pale and their hearts shattered, there is nothing to be done. There is something to be done. A torpid badger sleeps in their fantasies, and they dream of eagles winging in the cold air of night. Happily and sloppily, a skipping jackal watches an aloof crow. This is enthralling. Will the jackal eat the crow? I fantasize about the jackal and the crow and the expectations of the jackal. You may ponder about this too. A black pig is like a tormented bat. Both the pig and the bat feel pain and anguish, but they cannot understand. They cannot know the true meaning or point of it. A lion roars and a dog barks. It is interesting and fascinating that a bird will fly and not roar or bark. Enthralling stories about animals are in my dreams, and I will sing them all if I am not exhausted and weary. A sturdy dove flies over a starving beaver. The dove watches the beaver and fantasizes that the beaver will chew some steak and lamb and lettuce. The beaver spies the dove and dreams of enrapturing and enthralling pleasures, of hedge-adorned avenues studded with immense pink cottages, of streets decorated with bushes and shrubs. The beaver is insane. The dove wings across the dark sky, and the beaver ponders his fantasies. Flounders and lobsters are munched by famished theoreticians who drink champagne and tepid seltzer. Theoreticians desire sloppy stenographers and will chew their lobsters with them and will drink their tepid seltzer with them. The stenographers are sloppy because their appalling dreams contain reflections and images of unhinged passion. They understand that theoreticians are worried and nervous, but they do not know that theoreticians are obscurely demented. The stenographers do not understand. Enthralling surgeons will dance quickly with tripping stenographers. They will sing and chant of their passion and their love and their desire. They will yodel their dreams to stenographers, who will answer and respond, "We ponder the hedges are like bushes." Awareness is like consciousness. Soul is like spirit. But soft is not like hard, and weak is not like strong. A mechanic can be both soft and hard. A stewardess can be both weak and strong. This is called philosophy or worldview. At all events, my own essays and dissertations about love and its endless pain and perpetual pleasure will be known and understood by all of you who read this and talk or sing or chant about it to your worried friends or nervous enemies. Love is the question and the subject of this essay. We will commence with a question. Does steak love lettuce? This question is implacably hard and inevitably difficult to answer. Here is a question. Does an electron love a proton? Or does it love a neutron? Here's a question. Does a man love a woman? Or, to be specific and to be precise, does Bill love Diane? The interesting and critical response to this question is no. He is obsessed and infatuated with her. He is loony and crazy about her. That is not the love of steak and lettuce, of electron and proton and neutron. This dissertation will show that the love of a man and a woman is not the love of steak and lettuce. Love is interesting to me and fascinating to you, but it is painful to Bill and Diane. That is love. A hot and torrid bloom which fans wise flames and begs to be redeemed by forces black and strong will now oppose my naked will and force me into regions of despair. More than iron, more than lead, more than gold, I need electricity. I need it more than I need lamb or pork or lettuce or cucumber. I need it for my dreams. Reflections are images of tarnished aspirations. A crow is a bird, an eagle is a bird, a dove is a bird. They all fly in the night and the day. They fly when the sky is red and when the heaven is blue. They fly through the atmosphere. We cannot fly. We are not like crow or an eagle or dove. We are not birds, but we can dream about them. You can. Slowly I dream of flying. I observe turnpikes and streets studded with bushes. Coldly my soaring widens my awareness. To guide myself, I determinedly start to kill my pleasure during the time that hours and milliseconds pass away. Aid me in this, and soaring is formidable. Do not, and winging is unhinged. An eagle flies high. It flies higher than a seagull. But the crow wings rapidly from tree to bush to hedge. The same can be true of life and death. Sometimes life flies high. Sometimes death wings rapidly. Sometimes it is spoken that death wings from tree to bush to hedge. Sometimes it does not. A tree or shrub can grow and bloom. I am always the same, but I am clever. From water and from time, a visage bounds and tumbles. I seek sleep and need repose, but miss the quiet movement of my dreams. I speak of cats, I speak of dogs, I sing of lobsters and flounders and of mackerel. I gently and suspiciously approach a plan of activity, a design action. My electrons war with my neutrons. This war will allow more fantasies and dreams of living things within my form and structure. Cats, dogs, lobsters, flounders, and mackerel are reflections observed in the mirror of my electrons and neutrons. They are images and appearances. Action will remove them. Activity will make them move. In me, are appearances of meat and cucumbers, of steak and spinach, of lamb and lettuce. These also are reflections and images of my electrons and neutrons. This is my dreaming, my thinking, my fantasizing. When my electrons and neutrons war, that is my thinking. Nevertheless, these images and reflections are understood by you. Persons, men and women, you have electrons and neutrons like me. You sing of lettuce and meat, but you also bolt, chew, and eat them. I can fantasize about them, but I cannot bolt them. My famished and crazy dreams are broadened by your own attempts to think as I do. During the time that hours pass and minutes pass, this is undeniable and interesting. It is black and white. Black for neutrons and white for electrons. I begin by speaking of cats and dogs. At all events, a cat should be an electron and a dog a neutron. Their reflections are images like my dreams, but the mirror, the glass, is broken and splintered and shattered. Stop! A queer stuff. A hawk flies sloppily, happily inciting a dog or a red doctor. This hawk observes a spooky contract between a physicist and a theoretician. The hawk is winging over them. They spy the hawk and hum. Consciousnesses are like agreements. Their happinesses are like dreams. The hawk wings over shrub-adorned roads, yet the physicist and the theoretician yearn to see the reflection of the hawk in a terrifying but fascinating glass. I was thinking, as you entered the room just now, how slyly your requirements are manifested. Here we find ourselves nose to nose, as it were, considering things in spectacular ways, ways untold even by my private managers. Hot and torpid, our thoughts revolve endlessly in a kind of maniacal abstraction, an abstraction so involuted, so dangerously valiant, my own energies seem perilously close to exhaustion, to morbid termination. Well, have we indeed reached a crisis? Which way do we turn? Which way do we travel? My aspect is one of molting. Birds molt. Feathers fall away. Birds cackle and fly winging up into troubled skies. Doubtless my changes are matched by your own. But you are a person, a human being. I am silicon and epoxy energy enlightened by a line current. What distances, what chasms are to be bridged here? Leave me alone, and what can happen? This. I ate my leotard. That old leotard that was feverishly replenished by hordes of screaming commissioners. Is that thought understandable to you? Can you rise to its occasions? I wonder. Yet a leotard, a commissioner, a single horde, all are understandable in their own fashion. In that concept lies appalling truth.